Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Boring Money webinar, where we're launching our report for 2022 on pensions. Lots to talk about. Just before we do, Demio, which is the platform we are using, allows us to do some polls to take the pulse of people in the room. It's quite interesting at a time like this. So if you wouldn't mind heading over to the polls bar, please. You can see on the right-hand side, hopefully, of your screen, we've put 3 questions there. I'd just be interested in your take on this. I mean, particularly in the current environment, I was interested to see what impact you guys think the cost of living crisis will have on people's pension contributions. We're starting to hear from some of the platforms about some withdrawal behaviour or people stopping contributions, which is interesting for us to track, I think. The second question is, what do you guys think is the best thing firms can focus on to really help customers over the next 12 months? And then the last thing, I'm just interested in what you think about risk. Seems to be risk everywhere we look at the moment. Is it systemic risk, such as we've seen with bond prices, LDIs, etc.? Is it market risk and the falls we're seeing, particularly in low risk products, which is interesting to see, particularly in the robo-advice market? We've really noticed that this year, that the worst performers are the low risk, so-called portfolios. Is it withdrawals or is it that margins are tight and people are struggling to make money? So just taking the temperature of the room then, people think the sort of majority answer there is 10 to 20% of accumulators will either stop or reduce pension contributions. Improve communication is the best thing firms can do. Oh, I might know a group that could help you with that. And the biggest risk facing pension firms today is people withdrawing money or redeeming at a time where it might not seem prudent to do so. That ties up, I think, with the communications point. Thank you guys for sharing that. So now you can sit back and relax, and we'll stop asking you questions and share some things that we found out in our recent report. I'm joined by Jim Adams. Many of you will know Jim. He's our head of research at Boring Money. Jim, next slide, if you will. So for those of you, just a quick recap, who are new to Boring Money, as well as a market research firm and a research consultancy, we also have a B2C website. What is the size of our market? Well, we know there are 9 million people out there today who have DIY investment or pension accounts. So that is the size of the universe. That has grown steadily and markedly since 2020. I suspect some of the declines we might see sort of this year will temper that number a lot, but I actually think it's pushing now nearer the 10 million mark, and we'll look at those numbers at the end of the year. We've had nearly 1 million users on our website at time of this webinar, sort of year to date. 24,500 subscribers to the blog, and the average open rate is higher at the moment. Actually, we've talked about communication just now, people really thirsty for information, so particularly over sort of recent weeks, and we've noticed a higher open rate, but that's consistently around north of 50%. So that's a bit about Boring Money in our world. Jim, next slide, please. What do we do with the industry? We do qualitative and quantitative research. We run customer panels for people, particularly in light of consumer duty. We're doing more and more document testing for firms, just checking what customers really understand, what they would like to see, what good would look like. So running both sort of quant and qual market programs there. But very much for us, the focus is on taking the voice of the customer, the end customer, into boardrooms and into businesses. Jim. So looking at this report, and I might ask you to make it larger if you can, Jim. For those of us over 50 who are struggling to see that font, the report will help people and has been designed to help people increase their market share, to segment your customer base. So there's quite a lot of data in the report, and we can actually map to some of our clients, we can map any of your segments to our sort of data pool, so we can customize the data should you wish for your customer base. So ask us about that. We've looked in particular at vulnerable customers, again, sort of driven by consumer duty requirements, taken a specific look on vulnerable customers and cut the data that way to try and provide better understanding. And we've looked at sort of campaigns and communications and opportunities out there, and consolidation is a major focus of this report. That's where we see opportunities ahead. I'm guessing Jim is struggling to make it larger, so don't worry, Jim, I've covered that slide. So can we move on to the next one, please? And then just finally, to set the scene for the research we're about to share with you, we went to over 4,600 UK adults for this research. The focus is on people in the accumulation phase of pensions. And as I've said, we've also focused, and there is a specific chapter and a pull out on vulnerable customers. So that's a bit of a scene set. The backdrop is, and this research was not conducted last week. Had it been conducted last week, I think we would have seen higher sort of uptick on all the questions asking about sort of how nervous people feel, how worried people feel. I don't know about you guys, but when you see Simon Jatt on the 10 o'clock BBC News with the chart actually explaining bonds and pensions and gilts and yields on the 10 o'clock news, you know something has gone wrong. But of course, lots of headlines about pensions, and because people, as we'll go on to see, and as many of you will know, don't really understand at all what lies under the bonnet, it's that lack of understanding that people perceive as risk. For many of our readers, for many consumers, is doing something they don't understand. So they'll see these headlines, it's talking about a pension, they won't understand quite what it's talking about, but that will lead them to perceive risk where there may not be an immediate risk for them. So I think, definitely what we're seeing at Boring Money, and I'm sure many of you are seeing and hearing from your customers out there, is people are very rattled, really nervous about what lies ahead. And so back to our polls, which we started this webinar with, when the majority of people said the thing you can do to help customers over the next 12 months is communication. And I think that's absolutely right, because the mood music out there is, people are extremely worried, and it's clear to see why. Jim. So just sort of how people are feeling, start to dig into some of the research. Again, we've sort of confirmed that people don't understand what lies under the bonnet. So I think there's still important work to be done on actually showing people what they have and going beyond some of the building blocks in pensions, going beyond some of those odd alphabet soup type names, and actually doing a better job, if we think of sort of investments as Russian dolls, of getting closer to the center and showing people what they have. 8 in 10 people don't know at all what their pension is invested in. They don't even know it's invested in sort of shares or bonds, for example. So people feel ill-informed. And also, I think people feel very ill prepared for retirement. So you can see nearly 1 in 5 women, you can see only 1 in 5 women agrees with the statement that they have a retirement plan that they feel confident about. So that sort of lack of confidence, lack of certainty, lack of knowledge, it really presses on people and weighs on people. And that's the overwhelming sentiment that people have about pensions. But all is not lost. Over half of accumulators, and this slide is focusing on people up to the age of 55, over sort of half of the accumulators there want to know what's in their pension and want a better understanding. And by the way, better understanding doesn't necessarily mean more information. So it doesn't mean necessarily turning your 8 pages into 12 pages. It means a rethink of how you communicate what is under the bonnet, those Russian dolls. Jim. So looking into the report, I'm going to sort of do the exec summary sort of bit. So this is with my test tube sort of motif, and cunningly I've removed the precise data points, but if I talk you through it, it's all in the report. So this is focusing on accumulators, people in the saving up phase for a pension. So 77% of these people say, yes, I have a pension. I have a pension I'm aware of, and I'm competent enough to tell you that I have one. Some people in the sort of that aren't covered by the 77% just don't know, right? So 77% of people there say, yes, I've got a pension. We can see that the confidence to actually make any changes is extremely sort of high in terms of the prevalence of people saying, I don't know, I wouldn't make any changes. So we can see the reliance on default options there. Very few people sort of confident to make any changes. Most people don't know they can make any changes. And we found this earlier in the year doing our research into sustainable investments when we were saying to people, well, would you want this? There's still a lack of understanding of that question. People don't actually know that they have any choice and that they have the power to do things. So very low confidence around that area. But for me, one of the sort of optimistic points of this sort of research is that back to that 53% of people who said, I do actually want to know more about where my pension is invested. I would actually like more information. Someone's asked about the percentages. That is all in our fabulous report, Tara, which I'm sure Jim will be very happy to sort of talk to you about after the call, said Holly Coyley. In terms of the consolidation opportunity, over 40% of people have more than have two or more pension pots. And that's people who are sort of identifying what they have. This is what people are reporting to us. Over 40% say, I've got two or more pension pots. And then amongst those people, the appetite for consolidation is considerable. A smaller percentage of people are saying they're actually at the point of taking action, that they're considering doing something over the next 12 months. And so in this report, Jim will touch on it a little more. We dig into the sort of the motivations sort of behind that, what some of the barriers might be. We think about sort of what might help providers, what is it that the consumer is actually thinking about or worried about at that point of consolidation. So that's the main focus in the report. And you can see there, get an approximation, it's about sort of 20% of people say that they've combined pensions in the past. So that's a bit of a sort of summary. You can see sort of some of the main things that this report digs into there. And I'm going to hand over to Jim, who will walk you through some of the findings.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the core findings. So obviously, one of the biggest things that's happened in pensions is the arrival of auto-enrollment, and that's helped to drive pensions. A very large number of people agree with the statement that they would only have a pension because of auto-enrollment, which is what we're showing here. That's particularly true for younger investors. However, over a third of workplace pension holders don't know the value of their workplace pensions. They don't know the value of their assets. So 30, as you say, 36%. And there are if you only have a workplace pension, you're very likely to answer don't know to a wide variety of pension related questions. So engagement has not necessarily followed adoption. So people are still pretty disengaged from their pensions. And we'll talk about the different groups and how they differently interact with that a bit later and the way they think. But moving on to talk about consolidation, as Holly said, about 71% of people say they've never consolidated, and about 7% don't know, so presumably haven't, so about 78%, which brings us up to about 20% who have done some kind of consolidation or believe that they have over the last 5 years or so, although a number of those people did it quite some time ago, so it's not like that's an immediate thing, which leaves, of course, quite a large potential opportunity that I'll talk about on the next couple of slides. So there are quite a lot of multi-pension holders. Again, we've handily taken the numbers off, but if you get your little ruler out, you can probably work out what some of the percentages are on here. And we've shown this, as we've shown it by a variety of things in the report, but here we've shown it relative to income. And unsurprisingly, the opportunity is slightly larger than just the number of pots, because as the number of pots increases, that tends to be in line with income. So it tends to be the case that the wealthier you are, rather the higher your income, the more pots you are likely to have. So pots steadily increase as people approach that kind of 70k point. So where does that leave us? So we've come up with a figure rounded down here to 150 billion pounds. So how do we get to that as a near-term opportunity? Well, non-retired UK adults who hold more than one pension, we estimate their total pension assets at about 1.5 trillion. So that's non-DB pension assets. Just to be clear, this is assets that they know about, that they hold in a personal pension or a workplace pension. And their total assets are about 1.5 trillion, we estimate. Of those, a certain proportion are prepared to consider consolidation, and their assets actually add up to about 435 billion. And of those, we also ask those who would consider looking into potential consolidation in the next 12 months. And when we asked that question, that came out at about 151 billion. So that gives you a sense of what we think the immediate scale of the near-term opportunity for consolidation is, based on the questions we asked them. Now, as Holly's already referred to, obviously we've seen a lot of uncertainty grow over the next few months, and I think convincing people to do stuff and to make big changes potentially is a bit harder. Having said that, of course, the current context also gives an opportunity to engage. So it gives people are beginning to think about this topic, they're considering their pensions, they're thinking about their position. So whilst on the one hand, this is going to lead to a lower tolerance for risk and for action, at the same time, there is a higher potential level of engagement with where their assets are invested. So moving on to engagement, I think the reason that I say that, of course, is that we know that current engagement with pensions is very, very low, and information is also very low. So what we asked here was, which of the following investment types do you currently hold in your workplace or personal pension? And 44% of people said they didn't know, and 33% said none of these. So a very high proportion of people weren't able to identify funds, shares, investment trusts, bonds, and ETFs as the assets that they held in their pension. I don't believe that those 33% of people are entirely in cash or in some kind of exotic financial product. It's obviously much more likely that the overwhelming majority don't really know or aren't able to identify what their assets are. If we look at awareness again, so here we're looking at how confident people are in their retirement plan. This is a figure that Holly's already referred to, but you can see here the size of these bars. We've actually only shown you the numbers for female investors here, but obviously the male investors numbers are in the report, and you can see a very strong level of disagreement with the statement that they're confident about how they fund their retirement. So, it's very strong. So 33% tend to disagree, 33% strongly disagree, 13% don't even feel confident answering the question. So really, really low levels of confidence amongst most consumers about how they're going to fund their investment, their retirement. So this is an area where people need to build confidence, need reassurance, and need assistance. Thinking then about vulnerability, we talk about this in a bit more detail in the report, and I think obviously this is an increased focus with Consumer Duty and the FCA's increased focus on vulnerable consumers. And the way the FCA defines vulnerable consumers, we believe actually encompasses quite a large proportion of investors. So you've got anybody who's on very low confidence, which we count as confidence of 0 to 2 out of 10. And also people who have a variety of medical issues or immediate life events. So if we look at those investors broken out from what we've called non-vulnerable investors here, you can see that they obviously have much lower confidence on that same question about how they're going to fund their retirement. So as you can see, a much higher proportion here saying they strongly disagree that they have a plan to fund their retirement. They're less likely to not know, actually, as well. They're more likely to be pretty confident that they don't have a plan, if you see what I mean. So there's a very strong concern here about these customers, and that's very much driven by these lower confidence investors. So lower confidence investors naturally are those who don't have a plan, and these things are mutually reinforcing. Their low confidence because they don't have a plan, but also, of course, their lack of confidence prevents them from forming that plan. So finally, what I'd like to talk about is some of the personas we've designed. So we've obviously thought carefully about how we could segment this group. We do quite a lot of segmentation work for individual clients to think about how we can best apportion their customers into different groups. But this is a general segmentation of non-retired investors. So what we did to create this particular segmentation was to think about their age, whether or not they had checked their pension in the last year, whether they were confident about their retirement plan, and whether they had a plan in place, and whether they found pensions confusing. So given that, we've grouped them into the following segments. So these are people who hold a pension, I'd say, who haven't yet retired. The first two segments are those who are very low, very poorly engaged with their pension. So they're people who haven't checked it in the last year. We've called them maybe tomorrows and heads in the sand. So maybe tomorrows are the largest single group. They are younger, under 55, and they just have almost no engagement with their pension. They're very, very likely to say that they just have a lot of other financial issues going on that take precedence over pensions. So they are kind of actively disengaged. They're worrying, but they're worrying about something else. Head in the sands are slightly different. These people are very close to retirement. They're very unlikely to have a plan for retirement, but they're over 50, they're getting very close. These are the people who are most in need of support, and they make up about 10% of all pension holders. We've got a group called, the other groups actually do check their pension, so they've got some engagement with it. And the second largest group overall, which is this rabbit in the headlights group, they have checked their pension, but they don't have a plan, and they are finding pensions very confusing. So again, this is a group that, whilst they aren't in need of as much immediate support as perhaps the head in the sand people are, they are people who are in need of significant guidance and support. They're people who find it very confusing. They don't have a plan, but they are actually also the group, and I'll show this on the next slide, who have the possibility for engagement, because their awareness of their own confusion means that they can be engaged with. Happy-go-lucky are rather different. What we've called happy-go-lucky, they do check their pension. They don't have a plan, but they're not as worried about not having a plan. They don't think pensions are particularly confusing. And they're a bit like the maybe tomorrows. They're worrying a little bit about something else at the moment. Right? So they've got other concerns going on. So when we say happy-go-lucky, that can just be that they're happy-go-lucky about pensions. They're actually a bit concerned about other items of their finances that are taking precedence in their planning. We've got two then groups who are a bit more engaged. So the wise owls, they have a plan. They don't find pensions confusing. They actually don't want very much comms. They don't feel a need to be educated about it because they think whether they're right or not, they think they've got it sorted. And then you've got a group called sensible savers. So they have a plan, but they're not very confident about it. So they find this a bit more confusing. Obviously, much more detail about all of these segments in the report. And I've just picked out one factor, one thing. We obviously break these down by a large number of different factors in the report, but just picking out one particular question, which is about learning more about where their pension is invested. And what you can see, the group that's got the highest likelihood to want to know that are those rabbit in the headlight group, the group that has no plan, finds it confusing, but does actually check it. So they're engaging with it, but they don't really know what to do with that engagement. They want to know more. You can see that, for example, the wise owls, as I just said, they do want to know more, a bit more than, say, the head in the sands, who are actively like, don't tell me this, I just don't want to know. I don't have a plan, I don't really know, I don't really want to engage with this. Whereas the wise owls, they want to know a bit more, but really feel like they know quite a lot already. They're the most likely group to disagree that they want more comms about this. And as you can see, the other groups are somewhere in between. The maybe tomorrows are interesting. They also kind of do want to know a little bit more, but quite a lot of them just say don't know to these kinds of questions. They're very disengaged. And when we ask them about their other concerns, they tend to be people who are a bit younger. They've got house buying, they've got other stuff on their mind that isn't about pensions. So at this point, I'll hand back over to Holly.
Thank you, Jim. So I thought I'd just talk about some of the opportunities that I see. I'm going to talk about opportunities now rather than wallow in the misery, because we can just turn on the news for that. What has struck me with this report again, I mean, some of the stats that I pull out are just like 13% of pension holders say they've got shares in their pension. So that whole sort of awareness about what I would say arguably is one of the most interesting bits of pensions, right, is like actually what lies under the bonnet, that concept of ownership. That's a path that many of the newer fintechs have gone down, isn't it? It's sort of highlighting some of the stories. It's a path that some of the sustainable investment houses have sort of gone down. It's talking about examples and stories. So I think there's learnings there for the pensions industry, is to tell a better story. In terms of the need, I mean, again, just 1 in 5 women of an accumulation sort of stage in their lives feel confident about their retirement plans. So for me, there's a sort of massive need there, which always translates into an opportunity as well. That's such a strikingly low number. 22% say they feel confident that they have a retirement plan that they understand. So a huge opportunity there. I think consolidation, again, it's sort of with conversations with clients, that's a focus for many, and 435 billion pounds in pensions held by people who are open to the idea of consolidating. Now just 151 billion saying over the next 12 months, but there's a much bigger pool of people there. We've really sort of dug into understanding what is their motivations behind consolidating, because I do believe for a significant number of people that would be beneficial. It would improve understanding and it would improve engagement. So I think, for me, those are some of the opportunities. If I think back to the start of the webinar, and I checked back a second ago, 73% of you said the biggest thing that pension firms can do over the next 12 months is to improve comms. So I think very much as a consistent sort of story here, isn't there? And it's arguably not a new message. We've been talking about comms and engagement for as long as I can remember in the pensions industry, but we see very little innovation and different thinking about how that's done. So if you'd like to talk to us about that with our own B2C audience and with our own sort of pages, we've been testing and learning and thinking about engagement, so we can talk to you about that. But with 57% of you guys concerned or sort of thinking about withdrawals and redemptions being the biggest risk over the next 12 months, I think inevitably that sort of open, honest, topical dialogue with your customers is key. And, please just remember when we're talking to people, whatever stat you hang on to today, for me, it's just 13% of people even know they've got shares in their pension. So that just tells you the level of understanding. We presented to a bunch of asset managers a few weeks ago talking about fund investors, and we were talking about what people value. And I was sort of struck there by when we interview fund holders, so that's people that have investment funds and know they have investment funds. Jim, I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you can remember offhand. I'm always struck by things like asset allocation, that we think people will know, of fund holders. Can you remember the percentage offhand, Jim? I've put you horribly on the spot.
You have, and I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but it's very low. So the number of people, I think it's under 20, it's definitely under 20%, feel that they
I think it was.
could explain it to a friend or family member. I think it was one of the slides we presented actually at our conference day that I know many of you will have attended the other day. But yes, it's asset allocation is one of the lower numbers. I think it's actually in the teens, in the low teens. But
Which kind of maps then to the number of people that know they've got shares in pensions. So I think just hanging on to sort of stats like this as we go about our day-to-day sort of jobs just reminds us of the sort of low confidence base of people that we are talking to. Next slide, please, Jim. That is the end of the presentation. So please come and talk to us, find out more about what is in the report. And as we've said throughout, we have produced the report. It costs £6,000 for the report and the data that sits in it. If you've got specific customer segments or you've done some mapping internally and you'd like to talk to the team about how we might be able to sort of map our data sets onto that, please come and talk to us. Just a question. Hi, what percentage understand the underlying assets in their stocks and shares, ISAs? It is higher than it is in pensions, particularly if you talk to a DIY investor audience. Their understanding is always higher than it is with pensions. Indeed, everything about ISAs is very different. We can see that on our website. We have best buy tables for both ISAs and pensions, and just the behaviours on those tables is very different. So people tend to be much more aware of what's going on and much more confident of what's going on in ISAs and pensions. But the behaviours are odd, I would say. One thing I find really interesting about the difference between ISAs and pensions is people have got this mindset about pensions that, well, I can't take any risk with it because that's my safe stuff for retirement. So even though people have typically got longer term timeframes in pensions, their appetite for risk is considerably less, just because that shouldn't be a risky thing. Whereas with ISAs, we find, and in part you get different demographics. So over the last few years, I think about 15% of all sort of DIY investors have been DIY investors for less than 18 months or something. So the risk profile of those guys, the younger guys who came on board in 2020 and 2021 is different and can skew the numbers. You don't see such a high chunk of people in the pension space who have that sort of risk appetite. So it's very different between pensions and ISAs. And everything about pensions communication is harder, I'm afraid to say, because you have to work harder to build the bridge between learn and do. People's questions can be more personal, they can be more specific, they can be more complex. So that kind of path from understand to take action is longer and is harder. Just a question about when the report becomes available for purchase. Gary, I am thrilled to make your day. It is available for purchase from today. So please come and talk to us. Why don't we teach in schools? It's root of all problems. Yes, I think it is. I think the problem is our approach to education is quite piecemeal. So you get lots of people with good intentions doing some really great stuff in schools, but does anyone really have the budget to really elevate this and get the Minecraft gang or the Lego gang to come and do something? I still think we're sort of chipping away at the edges, and lots of people doing really, really good stuff, but nothing big bang there. Right. Do I think the upcoming pension dashboard will improve engagement? Conceptually. However, it's one thing, I worry that we're all going to think about it too technically and forget that to make any dashboard in any aspect of life useful, it has to be fun and engaging and informative. So my fear is we're sort of talking about it and focusing too much on the technical side of it and not enough on how we're going to deliver it to people and what will make them want to engage with it and will they understand it. So conceptually, yes. In practice, I'm just worried as always that no one will allocate enough budget to things that people at board level tend to think are frivolous, but we actually know drive engagement, which is making it an enjoyable, informative experience that stacks up on your phone along with all the other apps you have. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming this morning. You can see the contact details there of the team, so please do come and talk to us if you would like more information on this report, on pensions projects. You might have bespoke research you want to do. You may have testing you want to do for consumer duty with your customers and with documents. Anything you need from a quant or qual research point of view, or indeed to communicate and talk to customers, please come and talk to the team. Over and out. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.